Hi, I'm Ivy. So kind of as we've learned throughout the book, we learned a lot about marriage and just kind of like the evolution of women and the role they play in marriage. Um, so now this chapter in the beginning focuses a little bit about how women's role in marriage is today. So while the role has improved greatly, women married to men continue to report lower levels of happiness than men married to women, women married to women, and single women. So there's a ton of reasons behind this, and I think that's pretty interesting, uh, to hear that. I find that pretty surprising. Actually, yeah, no, I thought that it was surprising only because I would think that people in homosexual relationships kind of get more of like, the judgment side of things, and it might be harder to kind of focus on your relationship. But after reading this, I kind of see why the reasoning behind it. So for starters, the work that women do as an unpaid job or on top of the paid job that they already have, it tends to go unnoticed by society and their spouses. A lot of times people, when you hear them say, oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom, people assume, oh, so you do nothing. Well, that's actually not true at all because, like, as you guys know, I'm sure, there's a lot that goes into it. And I learn it too now that I'm like living on my own. Like there's cooking, there's cleaning, there's picking people up, driving to places. Like it's a whole long process, and it can be tiring. And in my opinion, it can be like equally as exhausting as a day at work. And additionally, housework is, it's comprised to be feminine. So, a lot of, because of that, women are kind of more likely expected to clean, and that just kind of interferes in marriages. And on top of it, women married to men find it almost exhausting to try to get their husbands to do anything around the house. And that can almost become a job in itself, trying to nag them to do stuff, or you don't want to come off as like a bitch, but it's like a hard balance. And then on top of it, like in society, in like anywhere, wives are have more of an expectation, and that's seen throughout the media. Like if you see commercials that feature women, they're normally surrounded by like a feast or like a big prepared home cooked meal, whereas if it's like a husband, they're seen with like fast food or microwavable foods. And I think people get the idea that being like a dad is more fun and you can like have fun, like it's very temporary, whereas like being a mom, a mother, and a woman in like a marriage and in the family, it comes with like a lot more work, and you have to do more. So yeah, I just think that all of those being said kind of play a role into why a lot of women married to men report, being very like dissatisfied with their relationships.
I think that's like, yeah, it's very interesting. And I think another thing that really struck me that you mentioned was how house chores are like really catered towards women, and you even see it in like commercialism,
Mm-hmm.
how products are marketed towards women. Like you see, there's even like Dawn dish soap that's designed for like softening your hands. Like who
Yeah.
cares? You're washing dishes. Why is that a concern? Why is that a priority? But yeah, I mean, everything is catered towards women in terms of like cleaning, cooking, serving. Yeah, it's very feminized.
One thing that you said that really struck me too was the fact that we do kind of take domestic housework for granted, and that we don't view it as like real work. But and I unfortunately did do this just because like I was fortunate enough to have a mom who stayed at home and did everything. But now that I, have to take care of myself, I realize, oh my gosh, it's just as hard as working. It's really difficult. But anyway, so this week, my name is Joaquina. I did domestic outsourcing, which basically means that domestic outsourcing at its core means basically taking domestic or familial chores and like passing them on to other people. This has kind of become a norm in today's society and a necessity in today's society because both parents need to work in today's economy, and it's pretty hard for one parent to support the whole family. So it usually takes two people working to support the whole family. And domestic outsourcing used to sort of just be for people who are privileged in class to like build and maintain their relationships while pushing their domestic tasks on other people. But now, child care specifically, that sort of domestic task, everybody needs it. Everyone needs childcare because both parents are working. So according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the proportion of the amount of people that are working with a child who is under the age of 18 is 72.3%. So almost 3/4 of the U.S. population of mothers are working, and the unemployment rate for women who are married and have a child under the age of 3 is only 2.3%, meaning that 97.7% of women who are married and have a child under the age of 3 are employed. So that means that they're going to need childcare at some point, but childcare is extremely expensive. If you look at the state of Alabama, I'm not going to go too into all of the numbers that I have that I put in my blog, but basically it turns out that only 27.1% of people in the state of Alabama can afford childcare. Only a quarter. This leaves childbearing only to the upper class, and that's not what should happen. Childbearing should be an option for everybody. So it definitely is something that we need to look into. And I used Alabama as a reference state simply because it was kind of the easiest state to kind of show all these numbers for. So, but this is a wide problem throughout the United States. So, yeah.
I find that so polarizing because of how conservative Alabama is as a state. And if you're going to make it incredibly difficult for women to send their kids to daycare, you know what I mean? Like, there has to be something else. There has to be some other way to, like, make it more accessible to have a safe place to bring your child while you're trying to afford your family. It's pretty crazy.
I also see that in like a lot of parts like in our country, like just like you know things that you would think would be like basic like needs like provided are like I feel like not provided, like even like healthcare, you know what I'm saying, like
Yeah.
stuff like that, like you know, especially for like single mothers, you think there would be some sort of, you know, like programs, and I'm sure there are, but I think that, you know, there's not as many as there should be.
Yeah,
And
the South also has like growing rates of uh, fetal death. And like that's unheard of. Like, we live in, this is 2020, like babies shouldn't be dying before they're born. But they're making it incredibly difficult for mothers to access care. Like, there's no centers anymore. They're like getting rid of everything. It's crazy. I don't want to go off too much, but so going off of Joaquina's topic, I talked about the feminization of poverty. My name is Marissa. And basically, the feminization of poverty is the idea that the percentage of poverty is largely females. And I mostly looked at the United States when I was discussing this topic, but something that the textbook mentioned was that 25% of single mothers are part of the working poor population. And I feel like the feminization of poverty has a lot to do with the working poor population. And what that is people that still work full-time jobs, but fall below the poverty line, which is, I feel like, a lot of people. And 25% of single mothers. That's a pretty large percentage. And so the feminization of poverty is basically the idea that poverty is being feminized, and it describes how that percentage of low economic status individuals is increasingly women. The strongest predictor of claiming bankruptcy is becoming a mother. And I wasn't sure. I feel like that's just in general, which I think that's pretty prominent. And I really found like the idea of how high income jobs require a lot of financial stability in order to obtain higher status. many single mothers are forced to work minimum wage jobs in the absence of childcare. So there's a lot of having to pick and choose between living on welfare or sending your kid to daycare to go to work. And like I said, many are also forced to live on CE, which is just not enough to support a family on your own. It often, pretty much the majority of the time, leaves you below the poverty line if you live off of welfare. Um, and another large indicator of the feminization of poverty is domestic violence. It is it leaves women to be solely dependent on individual income. It's very expensive to divorce someone, and this leaves women in a very tough situation. With in terms of their income, and I feel like as a society there is a lot of designation in order to make individual freedom and access to resources. It makes it incredibly difficult for women in this reality, and I feel like that's not changing anytime soon. Um, and there just has to be this very large net of support for single mothers or women who are victims of domestic violence, that are sole providers for children. If we put so much dependency on women to be the sole provider, the sole carer, there has to be something to back that. So yeah, that's kind of the idea of that topic.
I mean, just based on kind of what I talked about and what you talked about, one thing I kind of drew is that like overall, in general, it's like as we know, like in general, it is like technically like dangerous to be a woman. That's what they say because we're already like we're a minority and we're a vulnerable population. But it's weird to think that being a mother is almost dangerous too because it's like as soon as you have a mother, and they even talked about it in my portion, you almost kind of like lose your status. You kind of like go down in status, and then on top of it, you said that mothers are becoming a mother like is like you become almost bankrupt. You know, that's kind
Did
of
either of you watch, sorry not to interrupt you,
no.
but either of you watch the show Working Moms?
No.
It's a really, really good Netflix series. The episodes are super short, but I'll never forget there was a part with one of the characters. She's like a marketing executive. She has this really, really big job, and she ends up getting promoted to another company, and she actually lies to them about being a mother for like the first 3 months of her being there until she like physically couldn't hide it anymore. And I just think that is so wild to me that women are discriminated against in the workplace for having children, but it is a huge indicator of being hired or not these days. And I feel like that's why women are continuously discriminated against, in terms of like whether or not I'm going to hire a man or a woman. So yeah, I'm really interested in the topic.
It really like when you think about it, there I don't understand the logic behind it. It doesn't make any sense, you know. But yeah, it's really true. It is like it really is like as much as I hate saying it, it's dangerous to be a woman. Like there's so many like, you run into so many challenges and you risk all the time. It's just yeah, it's crazy.
Awesome.
One
Well,
thing one thing that really like stuck out to me when you were talking is the fact that domestic violence impacts women not just because of people who are perpetrators, but also because the divorce rates, the amount of money it costs to get divorced traps women in those types of relationships. And I guess I never really thought about the two, and I never thought that the money could be the reason why someone stays in that relationship, but you sold me on that. Absolutely.
I mean, if you think about it, like, so if you're left a single mother, you no longer have the dependency of your partner's income, which makes it a lot harder for you to provide for your child, especially if you are in a very abusive relationship. where, you know, your partner most likely probably doesn't allow you to go to work. Like that's probably not a freedom that you have. And so it like is kind of just like continually double whammy, like you just smack it on, and then you look at it, and a lot of people, you know, have their judgments about domestic violence relationships and why don't they leave? Like, well, unfortunately, our society is not really designed for women to be able to succeed individually. So it's definitely an issue. And I mean, we fight for it every day. So, and that's why we're in college. That's why we got this opportunity.
Yeah.
Awesome.